Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome to Politically Correct. I'm DK Singh. In this episode, I'm going to talk about how Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan seems to be modeling himself on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, at least in his second innings as the Chief Minister. Or you can probably say that he is probably trying to emulate the Prime Minister's style of governance. So what he did last week was, what we have seen post results, we have seen many indicators. Latest ones being, last week he did that allocation of portfolios among ministers. In the allocation of portfolio, for himself, he has kept 27 departments, 3 or 4 more than what he had in his last term, but that's not the relevant thing here. What he did was, the allotment of the business of the government among ministers. That government notification says that all important policy matters will be with the Chief Minister. That means that all the ministers that he has, and we know like they're all newcomers, I mean, one-term MLAs, two-term MLAs, all fresh faces. Now, none of the ministers will be able to take any independent decision, because all important policy decisions are with the Chief Minister. So these ministers will virtually be puppets with Vijayan having their strings. I mean, that's what it looks like, because when you have all policy matters, the Chief Minister's office becomes pivotal. All decisions are taken there. This is exactly what Narendra Modi did after becoming the Prime Minister in 2014. So if you looked at his portfolio then, there was a new addition which caught everybody's attention, and it was all important policy issues. So the Prime Minister kept all important policy issues with himself, and we have seen the result. And what has happened after that is that all ministers have become, again we are talking about ministers becoming puppets or zombies or robots that I spoke about in one of my previous episodes. So this is what has happened at the center, with ministers becoming virtually figureheads. They are kind of holding ceremonial posts in a way. They are not policy makers as such. This is exactly what Pinarayi Vijayan is trying to emulate in Kerala. The second decision that was taken by the CPM secretariat, actually, not by Pinarayi Vijayan, but we know how that CPM secretariat is controlled by the Chief Minister, Pinarayi Vijayan. The party has decided that all the private secretaries of the ministers, they'll all be the party's nominees. So it's not just, like every minister in Kerala, they have this limit. They can hire up to 25 people as part of their personal staff. It was 29, I think it has been reduced to 25. Now, they will all be the nominees of the CPM, not of the ministers. Usually, the practice is, when somebody becomes a minister, generally his people who are loyal to him, who are kind of trustworthy, he takes them to his office. And people who have been very close to him, they are appointed as PAs, private secretaries, APAs, or officers on a special duty. You have all kinds of designations there. Now, the CPM has decided that the ministers will not choose them. It's the party which will give them those staff. In a way, it's the Chief Minister who will be actually deciding who will be on the personal staff of his ministers. So that will actually make it very easy for the Chief Ministers to keep a watch on the ministers, on their day-to-day activities. This is exactly what was done at the center also in 2014. So a guideline was issued that any private secretary who was with a UPA minister in the previous term, in the previous government, cannot be the private secretary of a BJP minister in this term. And it was called because due to administrative reasons, that was the reason which was given. But private secretary, when you talk about private secretaries or ministers, they are mostly bureaucrats. Most of them lost out because of that thing. Many of them were very competent ones. In fact, then Home Minister Rajnath Singh, he had picked up one bureaucrat, an IPS officer from UP cadre. That bureaucrat started sitting with him also in his office. Then after a few days, the PMO decided that no, the Home Minister cannot pick up his own PS, because that PS was the PS of UPA minister earlier, and that was how even the Home Minister of the country could not get his own private secretaries. But that's where I'm talking about bureaucrats. When you talk about political appointments like OSDs, PAs, APAs, there it's kind of unwritten that all these people who are on the personal staff of the ministers, even at the center, they are drawn from the RSS and its affiliated organizations like the AVVP. So many of the PAs and OSDs that you see in ministers' offices in Delhi, they are mostly from AVVP or some other affiliated organizations, RSS affiliated organizations actually. This is exactly what Pinarayi Vijayan is trying to implement there. It's not the first time that he has tried to actually get hold or try to have a direct control over the personal staff. In 2016, if you recall, when Vijayan became the chief minister, that was 2 years after the center implemented this, or this entire model of the political appointments coming from the RSS or not from the ministers themselves. In 2016, when Vijayan became the chief minister, he tried to actually have control over the ministers. So I think in November or December 2016, he had a meeting with all the personal staff of all the ministers. And it caused a lot of heartburn then, but then ministers could not really do much. Later on also it continued. So he was watching the Modi model of governance very closely even then. Now that he has come back as a super powerful chief minister on whom no individual in the party has any control in a way, because you do not have the anything called the left in Tripura or in West Bengal today. So you may have CPM general secretary, like an all-powerful general secretary, Sitaram Yechury, but he won't have any control on Pinarayi Vijayan, because he is somebody who has got a historic consecutive second term for the CPM in Kerala against all odds. So he is the most powerful communist leader in the country today. So the party or an individual or any party mechanism, be it Politburo or Central Committee, none of them will have any control over the chief minister. And that's why Vijayan in his second innings has started with moves aimed at totally controlling the entire machinery. So it's going to be as centralized. The chief minister's office in Thiruvananthapuram will be as centralized as you have the PMO in Delhi, with no other offices mattering and all these ministers becoming just puppets. If you recall earlier also, Vijayan's detractors would call him dhoti-clad Modi. That was how they would dub him as. That was their way of actually basically protesting against his authoritarian style. Authoritarian in the sense that, again, he was trying to kind of centralize all powers. What you see here, the PMO is PMO, all powers are vested in the PMO, nowhere else. Similarly, Vijayan was trying to do that here, and that was why he was getting that description. And his attempt to kind of use the government and the party apparatus to bolster his or to create his personality cult. That was exactly what was happening in Delhi also, and that's how actually his detractors started calling him dhoti-clad Modi. There were other reasons, of course, because he had the heavy-handed manner, or the free, I would say, the untrammeled powers the Kerala police had. So you had a lot of criticism of Kerala police for what many people believed were or alleged that there were fake encounters against suspect Maoists. There were custodial deaths. There were cases of custodial torture. There are lots of things happening, but Vijayan stood by the police, and that's how he invited the wrath of many NGOs, social activists, and opposition leaders also, because they found it very heavy-handed. And they started calling him dhoti-clad Modi. And of course, like within the cabinet, outside, the way he treated his challengers. So in 2016, if you notice, Achyutanandan, his predecessor, he virtually shifted him into what you would call the CPM's Margdarshak Mandal, what you call. So instead of creating a Margdarshak Mandal for, prime ministerial aspirants, like L.K. Advani and Murli Manohar Joshi and many others in the BJP, what Vijayan has done, he did in 2016 was, he made Achyutanandan chairman of the Administrative Reforms Commission, and after that stopped using him in election campaign for the party also. So he was virtually sidelined. And then we saw in the run-up to the elections, in the assembly elections, how he gradually got rid of any potential challengers also. So this particular a criterion that the CPM adopted at the behest of Vijayan before the elections, that anybody, if you have been a sitting MLA for 2 consecutive terms, you cannot contest elections. That resulted in many senior leaders losing out. I mean, at least 5 ministers could not contest because of the CPM coming up with this criterion at Vijayan's behest. After elections, what we saw? We saw him denying ministership to anybody who was there in his last term. So somebody like Health Minister Shailaja, who earned a lot of acclaim, I mean, globally in fact, not just in India, for the way she handled the pandemic. She was also left out in the name of bringing in fresh blood. So everybody, all ministers in Vijayan's cabinet today, they are all new. All experienced people have been left out in the name of bringing in new faces, grooming new faces. But this is probably not the time. And when if you're fighting a pandemic and you drop a successful minister, in the sense a minister who really proved her mettle, Shailaja, out of the cabinet, there is definitely something else, something fishy. It's not just about bringing in fresh faces, it's about establishing a supremacy. And this is what Vijayan has set out to do in his second innings especially. And that's why I'm talking about how, when you're talking about a new set of ministers, fresh faces, how do you groom them when you do not give them any policy making powers? And the CMO will have or will be deciding all important policy matters now, as I discussed at the beginning of this episode. So obviously it's not about grooming young faces. In an interview with my colleague Jyoti Malhotra last month in Kerala, when he was on the campaign trail, when my colleague asked him about his description or how or why he thinks he is described as Kerala's Modi, Vijayan's response was, he denied it flatly, that he has his own style. He does not have to emulate Modi. Modi might have his own style. But looking at what he has been trying to do in the past few weeks, it seems that he has started seeing some merits in that description. And he is definitely trying to emulate Modi now. That's all from me in this episode of Politically Correct. Thanks for watching.